Jay-Z just did his first official interview in almost 9 years. Finally, he addressed the heavy accusations that surfaced back in 2025. But as the interview went on, people realized something was off. It didn't feel like GQ was interviewing Jay-Z. It felt like Jay-Z was interviewing Jay-Z. Instead of clearing the air, his words seemed to raise even more questions. In fact, he went out of his way to say something symbolically that almost everyone missed, something that a former associate of Jay-Z recently came out and exposed. Today, we are decoding Jay-Z's 2026 GQ interview to reveal exactly what it's telling us about who he truly is. The first thing Jay-Z addressed in this GQ sit-down was the elephant in the room, the 2025 allegations. As most of you remember, Jay-Z was at the center of a massive legal firestorm involving claims alongside his longtime associate Puffy. Eventually, that lawsuit was dropped under what many independent researchers would call highly unusual circumstances. Now, while Jay-Z technically addressed this when it first broke, it was through a cold, calculated written statement, the kind penned by a high-priced legal team to minimize damage. This 2026 GQ feature was his first time speaking on it in the flesh, but if you were looking for clarity, you didn't get it. Before we even look at his words, we have to look at the structure of this piece. In professional journalism, you usually start slow, build rapport, talk about the legacy, and work your way up to the hard-hitting questions. It's a technique designed to keep the audience locked in for the big reveal at the end. But in this 30-minute feature, these allegations were the very first thing they mentioned. Why? Because this wasn't a standard interview. It was a masterclass in PR damage control. They weren't worried about viewer retention. They were worried about narrative control. They wanted to ensure that every single person who clicked saw Jay-Z clear the air immediately so they could spend the rest of the time talking about his luxury brands. To me, this signaling suggests that the pressure is finally reaching the top. But let's actually look at the code he used in his response. When questioned about the nature of the allegations, he claimed he was heartbroken and filled with uncontrollable anger. He argued that because of his street codes and his upbringing, he could never be capable of what he was accused of. However, many viewers found this hard to reconcile with the documented history we've seen over the decades. When you look back at the early days of his career, from the era of Beyonce's start to the persistent rumors surrounding figures like Foxy Brown or Rihanna, there has been a consistent pattern of young proteges being brought into the inner circle. If we're being real, street codes have never historically stopped anyone from certain behaviors. In fact, anyone who grew up in environments like the Bronx like me, or Brooklyn like Jay-Z, have seen firsthand how those in power often interact with those much younger than them. Jay's defense didn't actually address the root of why he was named in the first place. He didn't touch on the reports of private investigators allegedly showing up at the accuser's home in Alabama, a move that the Jane Doe herself described as intimidating. He didn't address the sudden shift in his public relationship with Puff, claiming they weren't friends, despite years of high-profile appearances together. The biggest red flag, however, was the lack of pushback. The interviewer didn't ask a single follow-up question. There was no why or how after Jay-Z's denials. It was a one-way street, which we see again when they pivot to the Drake versus Kendrick segment. This is when the conversation shifted to one of the most debated moments in recent music history, the 2025 Super Bowl. If you remember, the streets and the industry were practically certain that Lil Wayne would headline the show in his hometown of New Orleans. But then, Jay-Z made the executive call to select Kendrick Lamar instead. To the casual fan, it was just a business move. But to anyone paying attention, this felt like a strategic chess move aimed directly at Drake. Think about the optics. Lil Wayne is the man who discovered Drake and made him a global superstar. Kendrick, on the other hand, had just come off the most dominant rap battle victory in a generation, a battle fueled by his Not Like Us anthem. By placing Kendrick on the world's biggest stage to perform that specific record, Jay-Z wasn't just picking a performer. He was effectively endorsing the victory lap over Drake. Given the long-standing Cold War tension between Hov and Drake, the world saw this as Jay-Z finally throwing dirt on Drake's legacy. But in this GQ interview, Jay-Z claims none of that is true. He played it cool, stating he only chose Kendrick because he was having a monster year and that it was nothing personal. But we have to ask, is that the full story? Once again, the interviewer provided zero pushback. There was no questions about why Lil Wayne was allegedly led to believe the spot was his, only to be curved at the very last minute. Jay-Z wants us to believe he's operating on a level so high that he doesn't even see these petty rap beefs. But let's look at the facts, specifically what DJ Akademiks uncovered during that wild legal deposition last year. For those who missed it, Akademiks exposed internal communications within Roc Nation that were inadvertently revealed during a deposition.
Yesterday I did a whole deposition for, in the case of Milagro Cooper versus Megan Pete, or Megan Stallion. So they asked to put up an exhibit. They said, hey, exhibit girl, could you put up an exhibit that we want to show? If Shorty, instead of putting up the exhibit, shows her screen. And I see the chat. I see the chat happening with the lawyers. Oh! You want to see it? Here's a screenshot here. Bam! Quinn Emanuel, look at this. Look. I don't know why they're talking about OVO. What is OVO? I don't know why Quinn Emanuel in their Slack, I think it's a Slack, is saying OVO. I don't know. Interesting part. Tell Des. By the way, I posted we had a break. I told him I wouldn't be on my phone while I'm answering questions. But tell Des. If you're the lawyer for Megan Pete, why would you need to tell Des? Who's Des? The only Des that I know, and I could be wrong. Desiree Perez, the co-founder and chief executive officer of Roc Nation.
These weren't just random emails. They were notes showing that Roc Nation's top legal team and CEO Desiree Perez were actively looking into and discussing figures like Drake and Nicki Minaj. This is the smoking gun that contradicts that I don't care persona Jay-Z put on for GQ. If your legal team is obsessed with your competitors' moves, then your business decisions like the Super Bowl lineup are undoubtedly influenced by those same rivalries. It proves that Jay's claims of being above the fray are likely just another layer of the corporate mask. There have been many accounts of Jay-Z using bullying tactics and administrative power to suppress anyone who doesn't fall in line. We've seen similar allegations arise with Tory Lanez and others who found themselves on the wrong side of the industry machine. If Jay-Z has the power to orchestrate a Super Bowl halftime show as a tool for personal or professional vendetta, it reveals a level of control that most people can't even fathom. Throughout this interview, Jay-Z attempts to present himself as a balanced mentor, but the visual language hidden in the frames tells us a much deeper story. He projects the image of a god walking among mortals, someone pulling strings from the high-altitude shadows while the rest of the world watches the performance. But it's the specific imagery in the 2026 GQ feature that confirms he is still deeply immersed in the world of esoteric symbolism. Sharp-eyed viewers noticed that he repeatedly made a specific hand gesture, one that in the world of alchemy and hermeticism represents the divine feminine and the element of water. This isn't just a random pose, it's a signal of ascension through ancient hidden techniques. Then there is the most striking visual, Jay-Z holding this mask over one eye. Now we all know what the one-eye symbolism represents in the industry, but let's look at the specific artifact he chose. This is the Kifwebe Bakashi mask from the Sangi people of the Congo. Traditionally, these masks were used by secret societies to enforce social orders and connect with ancestral power. The white coloring of the Bakashi mask specifically represents benevolence and spiritual sight. By holding it, Jay-Z is signaling that he possesses a vision that the average person lacks, the ability to see beyond the physical veil and into the spiritual realm. In many esoteric traditions, the act of masking or unmasking is about the revelation of hidden knowledge to the initiate while keeping it protected from the uninitiated masses. This isn't just art, it's a statement of spiritual authority. It suggests that Jay-Z views his power not just as financial, but as metaphysical. And this is exactly what former NFL player Larry Johnson has been warning us about for years. Larry Johnson's perspective is unique because he wasn't just watching from the sidelines. He was actually signed to Roc Nation for a period. He saw the inner workings of the machine firsthand. According to Johnson's recent exposure post, Jay-Z isn't just playing with these symbols for cool points. He is a dedicated practitioner. Johnson alleges that Jay-Z's influence is powered by a much darker energy, one that required a specific trade to reach the absolute peak of global influence. He points to the 2026 interview as a coming out party for this new phase of Jay-Z's career. When Jay-Z says 2026 is all offense, Johnson interprets that as the unmasking of a hidden agenda that has been decades in the making.
Let's get into this interview, which I thought was hilarious. Right off bat, they told you exactly who he is. People are trying to break down why he had this Congolese mask and how it meant for the struggle or how it meant for the culture. They don't care about who they are as far as their identity. They're never going to tell you who they truly are or who we truly are. But they know, and they chose a side to be subjugated. He got his hands in the pyramid here, he got his hands in the pyramid here for the photo shoot, his thumbs in the pyramid here for the photo shoot, and of course you see the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Ra, which is the one-eyed symbolism that is all connected to Freemasonry or Prince Hall Freemasonry. As you can see here, it's all esoteric knowledge. They go from black and they go from white in one 35-minute video. The interviews wearing a black hat with a white background, then he wears a white hat and a black background, just like the floor in York Rite, Scottish Rite, and Prince Hall Freemason lodges is the checkerboard flag. So the very first part of the interview, he wanted to jump in and what happened to him as being accused. He didn't really go into it because the interviewer was selected for a particular reason. He wasn't going to give him any hard questions where he couldn't handle it. But all you have to see is what he's been propagating throughout his career. I mean, no one is out here really wearing "do what thou wilt," which is a quote by Aleister Crowley.
Whether you believe in the spiritual side or not, you cannot deny the consistency of the imagery. Jay-Z is telling us exactly who he is, and Larry Johnson is telling us exactly how he got there. What we're seeing in 2026 isn't just a career pivot for Jay-Z, it's a full-scale narrative shift. Throughout this GQ feature, Hov repeatedly used the phrase 2026 is all offense. But after decoding the layers of this interview, the structured PR, the deflection of the 2025 allegations, and the heavy use of esoteric symbolism, we have to ask, who is this offense actually aimed at? Is it aimed at the legal systems that try to hold them accountable? Is it aimed at the independent voices like Larry Johnson who are pulling back the curtain? Or is it a signal to the rest of the industry that the unmasking phase has officially begun? Jay-Z wants us to focus on the billionaire mogul, the father, and the steward of culture. But as we've seen, from the orchestrated Super Bowl moments to the internal Roc Nation documents exposed by Akademiks, there is a much more calculated machine running behind the scenes. When a man of this much influence starts talking about darker music and spiritual sight, we should probably take him at his word. The question I have for you today is simple. Do you think this interview cleared Jay-Z's name? Or did it just reveal how much power he truly wields over the narrative? And more importantly, do you think Larry Johnson is right? Is there a darker energy fueling this 2026 offense? Because it seems all these massive icons have to get involved in this side of the industry to cross to the next level. Like we all recently saw with Kanye West. Just last year, Kanye's career was in a dire state. But this year, he's performing at sold-out stadiums in front of tens of thousands. A performance that, just like this interview, tells us how Kanye made it to the very top. If you want to know what Kanye's recent performance at SoFi Stadium is actually revealing, watch this video right now. Also, if you're interested in videos that go a step further in revealing the truth without the fear of censorship, consider checking out my Patreon. I just released a new video where I reveal my thoughts on the stuff happening in the world right now. Trust me when I tell you, you don't want to miss that episode. You can find my Patreon in the description. And if you want to support unfiltered content, make sure to like this video and subscribe to join the truth movement. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.